So we want to bring in Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Equity Research Analyst Mary Ross Gilbert for more context here. Mary, you had mentioned that these third quarter net sales numbers look a little bit light, which is disappointing in light of the fact that Nordstrom held its anniversary sale during the period that ended. Usually that provides a pretty big boost to its results.
Yes, well, actually, so they had 1 week that shifted into this quarter from the second quarter, and that was a 200 basis points lift. So when you look at their comp sales down 6.8% versus the estimate from Analyst looking for a down 3.5%, that was worse than expected. And it looks like most of that really came on the full line side of the business, being the Nordstrom full line stores, whereas the Rack stores were I think they were down 1.8%, something like that. But if you adjusted for last year's shipment of online orders from stores, which negatively impacted about the business by about 100 basis points, Rack sales were okay. But I think they're sort of short when you compare the overall off-price business being, we had strong numbers coming out of Burlington this morning. And of course, we already had Ross and TJX last week with good numbers. So it seems like on off-price, they're a little behind, but they did indicate they didn't expect to turn positive until the fourth quarter. And we'll certainly learn more conference call.
Absolutely. So I want to ask you about Rack, because ever since they launched it, it's been doing pretty well. And to what extent is that cannibalizing the main Nordstrom business?
Yeah, so what they've always said is that's been their number one customer acquisition tool, and that draws business into the full line stores. So they're sort of saying, hey, it's really not cannibalistic. But the fact that they do have a strong showing of the brands that you typically find in Nordstrom.
Exactly.
And the fact that there's a lot of excess inventory generally out there in off-price, the consumer is choosing value, and that's what you're seeing. And then you're also seeing a normalization in the designer business, so we're going to hear more about that on the call. But what we've been seeing all year is that the designer business has really slowed down more to normalized levels, and maybe even off a little more as consumers are being a little more thoughtful in making a purchase and just not purchasing the volume that they had been.
This raises a lot of questions, Mary, about kind of what they can do next here. And particularly, I'm talking about the leadership and what Eric Nordstrom has tried to pivot this company. When you look at the sales declines in both of the main units, when you look at the stagnation that you have in terms of their online sales, which are still at the same percentage share that they have been for the last couple of quarters here, this almost seems like a company now that's almost in stasis. What gets it out of that?
No, Romaine, that is a really good question. And one of the things that they did announce is they have a new chief merchant, with one of the Nordstrom brothers. And that's what we're looking to hear more about, what changes are going to happen. And we certainly see that they need to up their game, both in the way they're executing in the store, but also online. If you go online and you look at their overall Black Friday, the presentation, I think, could be a lot better, especially when you look at other luxury companies such as, let's say, Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus, or even Bloomingdale's, and how they're out there, how they're going to market to reach the consumer. So I think there's opportunity there. The question is, how are they going to execute on that? And that's what we're looking to hear.
This gets to the broader question, Mary, and I think Scarlett was kind of touching on it too. I thought the whole idea of Rack and the traditional Nordstrom stores, they were supposed to be kind of complement each other. And we saw that, I felt like, I don't know, it was a few years ago before the pandemic, where Nordstrom itself would have issues, but Nordstrom Rack would do well, and that would kind of be the pillar that keeps it up. And we were kind of talking about this before the break, that there are a lot of companies, retail companies, that built up similar structures, whether it was what Gap did, whether what you're seeing with Urban Outfitters, these sort of multi-brands where if one does bad, the other does well. Is that whole structure, is that just broken?
It kind of raises an issue. I don't think it's broken, but I think what they're finding, Macy's has done the same thing, Romaine, with the backstage concept that Macy's has. And of course, we saw stronger performance out of backstage than we saw out of the regular Macy's business.
Can I stop you there for 1 second? I ask people on the street, do people understand what backstage is? And I say that because there is a branding exercise there that I felt works against Nordstrom by calling their other store, their off-price store, Nordstrom Rack.
I agree. I think it should just be the Rack, rather than Nordstrom Rack. But I think the reason why they keep the name in there is they feel like they're highly differentiated because they're carrying they're supposed to be carrying the same brands that they offer at the Nordstrom business. But right now, especially coming off 2022, we are really seeing good, strong national brands across all of off-price.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty competitive out there.
Yeah, it works against them right now. So inventory management has been critical for these department store chains, and we've heard from Macy's, we've heard from all these other companies and how they proceed with that. If Nordstrom, a company like Nordstrom, gets the inventory management right for the full-line brand, for the full-line store, doesn't that mean that Nordstrom Rack will suffer as a result because there's less overflow going into Nordstrom Rack?
No, not necessarily. I mean, it raises a question, Scarlett, but the thing is, right now, across the industry, and we heard this with all the off-price retailers, there is plenty of excess national branded merchandise out there. They're not seeing any slowdown whatsoever in that. And so I think the same will also be true for Nordstrom Rack, even with Nordstrom getting the full line inventories, in check. Because remember, this is primarily national branded merchandise, and they do carry a fair amount of private label within the Rack stores too. And the problem that they had previously that hurt the Rack sales had been, let's say, poor execution on the private brand. But they're seeing an improvement this year, and that could sort of help.
All right, Mary, great to catch up with you. Mary Ross Gilbert over at Bloomberg Intelligence, a breakdown of Nordstrom's earnings.